where were all you Star Kid people when my sex education video came out? Where were you? It went from 600 down to 80. Step up your game, boys. Try to ignore my gaping hole throughout the video. So to get back into the swing of things, I'm going to do another show which has recently been released on Netflix. When I saw it, all of my orifices opened at once. I was so excited. The Assassination of Gianni Versace. I need to preface this video by saying that I think that American Crime Story, The Assassination of Gianni Versace, is one of the best pieces of art ever created in the span of human progress from any medium. Oh gosh. The show is a 9-episode dramatic retelling of the real story of the murder of famous designer Gianni Versace. He was shot on the steps of his villa by one of the most wanted men by the FBI at the time, Andrew Cunanan, who had killed 4 men previously, but they were all gay and not famous, so the police were just kind of like, chump change. It's based on true events, primarily Maureen Orth's book, Vulgar Favours, Andrew Cunanan, Gianni Versace, and the biggest failed manhunt in US history. The show takes a tragic, shocking, completely unjust murder and makes it feel like a character-driven story rather than a step-by-step murder case. Stylistically, in terms of set, costume, colour palette, cinematography, the show is stunning. Every single shot is gorgeous, and not just in the very obvious way where it's clearly trying to be like, look how pretty our cinematography is. Every shot aids the story and the characters and is always put in there for a reason. For example, tracking shots are actually used a lot in this show, and it builds the tension so perfectly. The first little scene in the whole show, it's done with so many long, seamless tracking shots, and it's then paired with this orchestration which builds the tension so well to the point where every tiny movement that each character does confuses you. You're like, why is he picking up the magazines? Why is he walking? Why is he breathing? The colours in the show are bright and vibrant. They capture the youth and the excitement of Miami during that time, which made Versace want to go there in the first place. And it contrasts so beautifully with the very dark and very twisted characters who are shown to us through these pretty colours. The locations are so well chosen. They show the effervescence and the wealth and the indulgence of the world that Andrew Cunanan so desperately craves. And then the locations they choose for Andrew's dwellings, like his flat, his workplace, everywhere where Andrew is by himself with nothing to conceal him. It's very dull and very damp looking and just very unpleasant when you contrast that with the rest of the environments that he's put in. Andrew's desire for opulence and this glamorous life is made all the more obvious by these choices, even if we don't consciously realise. Something else I want to really quickly mention while we're talking about the stylistic choices, the editing of this series. They have done it so brilliantly. Cut to black varies in length and it's so unnerving. Each time it will cut to black and it will go on to the point where you're like, oh, has it stopped working? And then it will cut, and it constantly keeps you on edge. But then as the series goes on and you start to get used to it, they make them shorter so that then they shock you and they take you off guard, and it's so well done and makes the series all the more tense. It's such a subtle but a clever tool. People have been weirdly obsessed with Penelope Cruz's portrayal of Donatella, which is fine. It's good. Like, she's a great actress, but people are kind of brushing over Darren Criss and Edgar Ramirez. She's only in a couple of scenes. These guys are in the whole thing. Edgar Ramirez and even Ricky Martin are completely shafted when people are talking about the performances, even though they are so good. What I loved about watching this show was even minor characters like Lee Miglin's wife has very few scenes, but every single one, you can tell she's putting everything she's got into each scene she's in, and it's so impressive. Every single performance is emotionally engaging, regardless of whether it's 10 minutes or 10 seconds long. Darren Criss as Andrew Cunanan was obviously incredible. The only thing I would say is that it could be interpreted that he overacts a bit and you feel aware that he's acting, but I feel like this just plays into Cunanan's character because him as a man was always putting on a performance and was always trying to convince people that he was this sophisticated, wonderful, generous man. But Chris's performance is still so deeply troubling and unnerving that my boyfriend, who I watched it with, can't even watch another film or series with Darren Criss in because all he sees is Cunanan and he's really scared of Darren Criss. Well done, Darren. You're in my boyfriend's nightmares for life. Yeah? Yeah? I don't know. Well, you have one first. Yeah. Yeah. That'll do. The writing for the show is only what I can describe as pure poetry. Every single line has so much subtlety etched into it. It's everything I want to achieve as a writer. The structure of the show is so cleverly done as well. We know what the story's about, so they start with the assassination of Gianni Versace and then work backwards and see what caused what. How does this person know this person? What is the motivation behind this action we've already seen? Once you've seen a character be murdered horribly, and then you work backwards and see how they met and their genuine and friendly and intimate interactions are so much more sinister. As well as that, we don't just jump forwards and backwards. It goes, backwards, forwards, da-da-da. The time frame is all over the place, but that just constantly keeps you aware and keeps you on your toes, keeps you guessing what's going to happen and where we are in the timeline. But that's what I love about scripts like this. The audience, we're not spoon-fed anything. We are left to work everything out ourselves. People always live... Cameo. People live up or down to the expectations you set for them. If you give someone a dumbed down script, you end up with people who watch the Kardashians and need the plot marked out on a chalkboard. What I love is that we don't need a huge amount of backstory to understand these characters and their deep values and personality traits. They can be shown in even the most subtle interactions and the most innocuous lines. An example I will give for this is when Cunanan and Versace having a chat. They're having a lovely conversation, and Versace says to Cunanan, "Every dress I design, I think I design for my sister." Cunanan says, "Oh, that makes me want to cry." And then Versace says, "It makes me happy." Just that handful of lines sums up the base difference between the two characters. We don't need a whole, "it all started when I was a young boy." We understand the characters little by little in these subtle lines, so that when we are given their backstory towards the end of the series, we feel like we've earned it. The backstories of these characters are a reward, not a chore, which backstories can so often become. By structuring the series in this way, beginning and ending with death, Versace at the beginning and then Cunanan by his own hand, we are left with this feeling of fruitlessness and emptiness, and this feeling of waste which the story so perfectly captures, how both characters were wasted by what happened to them. The feeling of wasted potential is so potent in this series that it really, really does leave a sour taste in your mouth, but for a good reason. By leaving each character's backstory until the very, very end of the series so that it's in conjunction with Cunanan's death, we see how the events in Cunanan's life essentially led to both men's death. Each man's story is so delicately laid out that we have this really deep connection with each of them and feel all the more jaded and all the more mournful of each of them, whether we should or shouldn't. Obviously, Cunanan was a horrible fella. He should not be seen as a martyr or as a tragic, anti-hero who should not be given admiration. But this show gives him understanding. An intolerant society, a dysfunctional family with a history of mental illness and abuse, the enabling of Cunanan's toxic behaviour. The show shows us also just an incompetent FBI force who didn't care enough about the gay community to weed out and find this serial killer who posed a very real threat, and they didn't bother to find him before he could take more innocent lives. Darren Criss has said this in so many of his interviews, and I think it's very, very true. The American crime isn't just the assassination of Gianni Versace, it's the fact that we don't know about this story, really, and it's the fact that this man did go uncaught for so long. Even in documentaries that I've watched now, the FBI, they exonerate themselves of the blame, saying, "Oh, he blended in with a crowd too well." No, you just weren't looking. Do you have an opinion on the case, Flower? Yes, I think Darren Criss's performance was average. How dare you, Flower? Get out of my room. But in contrast to this not very cheery message, it also is able to show us how Versace took the homophobia and hatred that surrounded him and found beauty in his art and in his work and in life. This series changed the game for me in terms of filmmaking, and I truly recommend it if you are into film, or even if you're just into watching something that's good. It's the most beautiful piece of art with amazing direction, writing, performances, cinematography, editing. Everything in it is seamlessly gorgeous. It makes me so happy, and it makes me so angry because I'll never be able to recreate something like this, so fuck you, director.